Broadcast radio. If you were a child in 40s or 50s, this were your main form of entertainment and you better bloody well like it's on. Well, that and hitting unexploded bombs from World War II with a stick. Televisions were scarcer than hen's teeth in most households during this period, so families would gather around the sound box to hear a crackly, muffled voice read out the news headlines in a plummy manner. Or maybe you'd listen to Glenn Miller pumping out the latest banging track. I mean, I don't know, I'm old, but I'm not that old. Christ. Also played were radio dramas, of which The Archers was one. One that just happened to maintain popularity enough from its early days to get a Mosaic published game on all the major 8-bit formats in 1987. Well, not a NES or Master System one, that would be weird. How incredibly bizarre is this though? Before we get into the nitty-gritty of how you turn a rural soap opera with no visuals into a working computer game, let's have a look at what inspired it into fruition. Fruition, like fruit, like a farmer might pick, yes. The Archers was first broadcast on the BBC Home Service station in 1951. It started out with mission statement of being an everyday story of country folk. Nowadays, its mission statement is a contemporary drama in a rural setting. Things change. In the late 60s, it moved to its current and established home, Radio 4, a channel which is pretty much just spoken word. And yes, I did say current, because The Archers is still going. It's still a thing. And at the time of recording, is honing in on its 20,000th episode. 20,000. In comparison, the longest running television soap opera, also a UK thing being Coronation Street, well, that has a mere 10,230 episodes to its name. So who's up for starting that from the beginning then? Come on, it's never too late. I'm sure we can catch up. So what is The Archers? Well, it's a soap opera without a screen image to tan your face, and thus makes this a bit, well, incredibly difficult to fill this video with imagery. I mean, we've just got farm animals on the screen at the moment. Honestly, if you radio producers in the 1950s and you Mosaic software types in the 1980s could just get in a time machine, all right, at some point in the before times and just figure out ways that you can make my life easier. I think it's imperative that you go back in time and make the lives of small YouTubers easier in 2023. I think you're being selfish not to do that. So in the show, you've got the core family of the Archers, who I presume they're never going to write out, living their life in a fictional village, having fictional lives with other fictional folk, doing fictional soap opera-y things for 70 years plus. Generations and families move on, but the Archers maintain as a constant in the show. So this game then, The Archers, released on the Atari 8-bits, the MSX, the Commodore 64, the Spectrum and the Amstrad CPC back in 1986 and 87. I'm not going to cover the MSX and Atari 8-bits here, but all the games are the same anyway, so I guess it doesn't really matter. This title was published, as previously mentioned, by Mosaic, who also published the structurally similar Yes Prime Minister and Adrian Mole games that I covered in the Spectrum games based on TV show series. The Adrian Mole games were even programmed by the same team as this Archers game, that being Level 9 Computing. All four of the games have the same central conceit. You're given a text-adventure style display, but instead of typing in things like go east and pick up swan and shag swan, you're instead given 3 to 4 choices, and those choices have a consequence. Think of it then as a sort of proto Telltale game, like the Walking Dead game from 10 years ago, something like that. The Archers version of this concept might just be the best and most comprehensive of all of the previous Mosaic titles that I've covered. It's aided no doubt by the Archers scriptwriters helping pen the scenarios in the game itself. That's a nice touch, I suppose. The game itself is split into 4 parts with 4 distinct characters from its mid-1980s period. You've got Jack Woolley, who is a late middle-aged, well-to-do, pompous, self-made businessman who is a staunch Thatcherite and runs a few local businesses. You've got Nelson Gabriel, who is a rough chap with a menacing reputation and a shady history, a real black sheep of the Gabriel family. You've got Eddie Grundy, a married but luckless slob, always trying to raise money however he can, whilst harbouring dreams of being a rock star. Finally, there's Elizabeth Archer, tying us in with the title of the show and indeed the game. And she is a flighty 19-year-old teenager with an interest in boys and a love of the finer things in life, without the effort to get those finer things in life instilled in her. The last 2 are still, at the time of recording, part of the Archers cast, though presumably Elizabeth is no longer into dating 19-year-old boys. But, I mean, it works for Vorderman. I suppose Elizabeth Archer can get some of that young man meat. It's up to her, she's probably in her prime. Well, you're probably thinking, well, I guess I control these characters like an adventure game and get them to some eventual goal or whatever. And that was certainly the case with the Yes Prime Minister and Adrian Mole games. In this, it's a lot different. You're not playing the part of Eddie, Nelson, Jack, nor Elizabeth. You're playing the role of the Archers showrunner for Radio 4. Yes, you're still chasing a goal. That is the goal of increasing the current listenership from 2 million to 3 million. You have to get more people into listening to the Archers as a regular thing while not losing your current audience. You have to make decisions based on several factors. Some are based on the characters themselves. If in Eddie's section you start spending loads of money, the listeners will send angry letters to the controller wondering where the usually struggling Eddie has got his cash flow from. Similarly, you may do something that offends your audience. Animal cruelty scores very low with them, as does spiking soft drinks with alcohol. Should you threaten Eddie's old man with being put into a home, the Radio 4 bosses will come down on you like a ton of bricks. You see, a lot of Archers fans are pretty old themselves, and they have genuine concerns that their family may threaten to put them in a home. That's pretty clever, right? But it's not just your audience you need to be worried about. You see, the Conservative government might not enjoy the content you're putting out if you're being perhaps a little bit too left-wing. So don't you go telling the Archers listenership that some of the language that the government is using is a bit 1930s Germany, because I can assure you this, the rest of the Radio 4 team will not all stand in unison and refuse to work if you're given the boot. Similarly, those woke lefty pressure groups won't like it if the show gets a bit too capitalist or gammony. So these are potentially game-ending scenarios for you, no matter the progress that you're making with boosting the listenership. How smart is this as a game concept? I'd like to see this reintroduced again, to be honest, in a modern setting. The Archers is a balancing act at its core. It is a traditional soap opera with the values of its traditional listeners, but it won't grow unless you provide some exciting storylines. But at the same time, you want to keep those regulars interested. Otherwise, you're in a hole in a bucket scenario. You may be gaining some, but you're losing some at the same time. It's an incredibly smart idea. I'd say a knowledge of the Archers in 1985, well, that probably does help. As you can imagine, as a Transformers-loving, sugared-up little 7-year-old turd, I had no interest in this whatsoever at the time. And guess what? I still have never listened to an episode of the Archers. Having knowledge of their characters and their interpersonal relationships with others is no doubt going to help you make correct decisions for each of the characters. But you do get a gist of who they are regardless within about 2 minutes of playing. That's a really good reflection of both the writing, not only of the Archers writers drafted in to assist with the game, but the folks at level 9 who clearly know how to make the game engaging to saps like me who've never seen, or rather listened to, a single episode. The Archers game most certainly would not have appealed to me as a child, but as an adult, I can totally see how genuinely creative, funny and well executed this game is. It is extremely short-lived. You'll see everything you need to in the first 2 hours, yes. Repeated playthroughs just see the game mixed up. Basically, it will just play the scenarios in a different order. But I still heartily recommend this. It is a very clever game. I never thought I'd be saying this at the end of the review, but I am genuinely impressed with the Archers computer game. Who are me lovelies? Amstrad Action gave it a 6 out of 10 in their issue 16. They said it is a game where you just enter 1, 2 or 3 to select a course of events. And is that worth it for a few hours play and a £10 price tag? They said yes, but only if you're a huge Archers fan or someone buys it for you for Christmas. Commodore User gave it a 4 out of 5 stars in their issue 39. They argued if you're an Archers fan, you'll love it. If you're not, you'll still find it entertaining. Crash Magazine gave it a 90% in their issue 37. They put it to you that the extent that you understand the concept will govern how successful you are playing the game, and that the Archers is very good. CMVG said in their issue 63 that if you're an Archers fan, you'll enjoy the game, and they gave it an 8 out of 10. I'm noticing a theme with these reviews. I think you have to be an Archers fan to really get the most out of it, but you'll like it anyway, and they're completely right. Next up, we go from cow udders to human ones with the Hooters game on PlayStation 1. A booby 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 booby! Like, subscribe, and K thanks, bye.